How's it going, everyone? Today I'll be doing a full aspect and basic player card review of cards from the Silk Hero Pack, punctuated as always by a top 5 list of what I view will be the most influential cards in this pack from a power level perspective. So my review is a little bit more geared towards the competitive side of the game, not just talking about what's the most fun or unique thing to do, but how do I see these cards adding to the win rates of existing decks, maybe creating their own archetypes that I expect to have strong win rates, a bit more on the spiky end of the review spectrum. So we'll talk about first the cards that did not make my top 5, then we'll count down the top 5 list and touch on the reprints at the end in case you are a newer player. I'll try to be as objective as I can using some of the metrics I've talked about in my strategy videos: efficiency, tempo, flexibility, and loss mitigation. Feel free to check out those strategy videos if you want to learn a bit more about those. Ultimately, there will be some subjectivity as I rank these into a top 5. I try to account for both each card's power level ceiling, maybe in the hands of a certain hero, but also just broad applicability across many different decks or heroes. I'll try to value both of those, and I value these considering a full collection. So if you're a newer player, then I'll highlight maybe a couple cards that are going to be a little more important for you. But in general, I'm trying to take this approach of looking at these cards in the context of the entire game and seeing what they do for us. So let's start with the cards that did not make my top 5. These aren't ranked outside the top 5. It's just kind of by aspect generally. So we'll start with Stop Hitting Yourself. This is a 2-cost protection event. It's an attack, hero response after you defend against an enemy attack and take no damage. Deal damage to that enemy equal to your defense for that attack. So there's a few similar cards that we've seen before. We recently saw Riposte. This is a 1-cost protection event, gives you +2 defense, but then deals 3 damage back. We have Counter Punch. This is 0 cost. Deals damage back equal to your attack, and granted your defense can get higher than your attack, so this costs a little bit more. The problem with all these cards, kind of the first problem, is it's pretty rare that you're happy to be defending and attacking the same enemy. So right, if the villain is attacking, we're generally okay defending that, but I place a very low priority on villain damage, because it does nothing to address encounter cards that we might be dealt or that might already be in play. So most heroes should be able to have enough damage in their deck from playing allies that can attack and their identity-specific events. I'm very hesitant to put a card in my deck specifically to do extra damage to the villain outside of very unique circumstances. On the other side of it, we have greater permission to attack a minion. Attacking a minion, prevents all of the negative value that would build up from it activating against you turn after turn after turn. But the problem is we have to add in the cost of defending that minion's attack. So as opposed to if we just killed it the previous turn, we wouldn't have to have defended against it. So we kind of have to add that defend to the cost of whatever we're doing to take out the minion. So there's not like just a great use for it. It's either a relatively inefficient way to deal with a minion, or it's villain damage, which, like I said, I just don't value super highly. Even though you can kind of live the dream and bump your defense way up, play some expert defenses, hit the villain for 10, like that's still a very late game play, and just generally not gonna push in the early to mid game towards stabilizing and kind of building momentum against the hero. So not a huge fan of Stop Hitting Yourself. Can definitely make a fun deck, tell some fun stories out of it, but not a card I'm really looking at in my high power level decks. Next, we've got Stun Gun. This is a 2-cost protection upgrade. It's a tech and a weapon. Restricted, uses 2 charge counters. As a hero action, exhaust it, remove 1 or 2 charge counters from it. If you removed 1 counter, stun a minion. If you remove 2 counters, stun the villain. So essentially, we're going to either stun 2 minions, or maybe stun the same minion twice, or stun the villain, because the 2 charge counter is not very modular. We're either going to spend them both to stun the villain, or spend them twice to stun minions. 3 ER for stunning the villain is not great. I mean, it might be an okay exchange, but I generally value negating a villain activation at around 2 ER, either with an ally block or the stun effect that's tacked on to other cards in the game. So look, stunning is always, can be quite strong, but I just think we can get it for a bit cheaper. At the very least, this isn't like jumping out to me as a new efficient way to stun the villain. Now, stunning minions, this can range from crazy strong to almost completely irrelevant. If we're just stunning a minion to like stop it from activating, I'd much rather use those resources to damage it and take it off the board, be a more permanent solution. Stunning it is, it's kind of just kicking that can down the road. You're ultimately not getting positive value out of the resources you've invested here. I guess you counter its activations, yes, but just as opposed to using those resources to take it out, not something I love doing. But then on the other hand, say we're using it to discard a vulnerable minion. That's incredibly strong. Say we're playing against the Thunderbolts, or maybe just we have the Thunderbolts as a mod set in one of our random games. Then stunning those minions is kind of like stopping a whole activation. And in that case, we've got 3 ER to stop 2 activations, which is quite good. So I just think all things considered, there are those cases, but it's a relatively small percentage of available scenarios. I do love, design-wise, it's a great inclusion. Like every hero in this wave seems to have some card that helps them play the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. box, which if you're a newer player, that's kind of what you're going to buy is the recent stuff. So I think definitely play it if you're going up against Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Don't think it's adding a ton outside. We should talk about, it is a tech, so tech is a very relevant trait. One of the strongest protection cards in the game is Repurpose, where you discard a tech to ready your hero and get stat buff equal to that tech's cost. So the best cards with Repurpose are like Energy Barrier and Plasma Pistol, cards you can use a couple times, and then once you've gotten most of the value out of them, you can repurpose them away because you have to discard them. The best part about Stun Gun uses all of its charge counters. So again, just spending 1 charge counter to stun a minion, Stun Gun will stick around for you to repurpose. But you didn't really get that much out of the charge counter. So I'd rather just play these other options first. There's a few other tech stuff. There's Gemma Simmons and Leo Fitz. You might just want a really high density of techs. And Stun Gun, it's a tech that can stun the villain at not an atrocious cost. So it might sneak into some of those decks. But especially if your hero's already got a lot of techs already, I think this is just kind of far down the list of techs we're happy to play. All right, next we've got Dr. Sinclair. This is a protection support, costs 2. Persona and a therapist. As an alter ego action, exhaust Dr. Sinclair, spend a mental resource, heal damage from your alter ego equal to your recover value. You may discard 1 status card from your identity. Any player may trigger this ability. So we've got a significant upfront cost here of 3 resources. Not crazy, but we don't really get anything right away when we pay these 3 resources. Now this alter ego action, how valuable is this? It's 1 resource to heal for usually 3 or 4, and then discard a status card from your identity. So if you're not getting the discard of a status card, I think it's still an okay exchange. Like you would generally do that, but it's kind of a long ways to go to make up for the initial cost of Dr. Sinclair. So where this really is strong is when we're able to discard status cards from an identity. There's some scenarios where that can happen pretty often. There's some scenarios where that won't happen at all. So if we're really not doing that at all, Dr. Sinclair is not a great card. But if we're, consistently stunned and confused, especially at the table, right? If we're in a multiplayer game, anyone can use this. So there's more likely somebody that can make use of Dr. Sinclair. One knock against Dr. Sinclair is that I think she's quite a bit worse than the Night Nurse. Granted, maybe it's not fair to say a card is worse than possibly the best protection card in the game, one of the very best. Now this is an older card from a very hard to get pack, Doctor Strange. So maybe another reason it's maybe not a fair comparison. But right, having to continually invest resources in this is just a little bit rough, a little bit slow tempo-wise. I'd be maybe inclined to play this if I've got one of the really high recover heroes, someone like She-Hulk or Miss Marvel or Wolverine or X-23. Like healing 5 or 6 for 1 resource, like that's incredible. I think Wolverine, especially Wolverine's obligation, stuns and confuses him, so this might be a nice card to play with that. I'm still a little bit torn on this even because I think because the upside is really high. Like if you're doing this every turn, it takes, might take 3 or more turns to kind of be happy with the value, but like that is a lot of value if you're discarding a lot of status cards with it. So this one was kind of close for me to put at number 5, but ultimately I like some other cards a bit better, so it's outside my top 5 for now. Next card we've got is Scarlet Spider. This one is Ben Reilly, so I had to double check here. The other Scarlet Spider is the character Kane, so I'm 99% sure, I guess it's easy to check, but pretty sure you can play both of these in the same deck. So 3 cost protection ally, 1 thwart, 1 attack, notably 2 consequential damage on both of those, and then 5 health. It's a Web Warrior. Interrupt whenever another Web Warrior character would take any amount of damage, Scarlet Spider takes that damage instead. So obviously, just doing thwarting or attacking with Scarlet Spider is like a last resort. Very inefficient to be doing that. You could only do that twice and then block, and that's pretty far below rate for the usual ally. But obviously, this card is more about that interrupt, preventing Web Warrior characters from taking damage. So in general, this is going to be better with saving your allies from damage than saving your hero. So when you save your allies from damage, you get additional uses of them. So say you've got a 2 thwart or a 2 attack ally, you're kind of exchanging one of Scarlet Spider's hit points for one of theirs, which becomes an additional thwart for 2 or attack for 2. So there's a high value upside there, especially if we're healing like Spider-Man Peter Parker as incredibly strong activations. But there's a couple of reasons that I kind of deranked this a bit. First is there's just a lot of competition for allies. I posted recently a SPDR protection deck playing against Mysterio, and as I was just going through my initial thoughts of what I would play, I ended up with 10 allies, signature ally and 9 Web Warriors. And I'm like, okay, I should cut 1 or 2 of these. And there's some really good Web Warrior allies in protection and in basic. So there's a lot of competition for that slot in the deck. At the very least, it's not like a huge leap above what the existing options are. And then ally healing is also a bit competitive, right? Something like Med Team that can heal damage kind of retroactively. The timing's kind of got to work out where, actually no, that's not really true. If you play, if you've got Peter Parker already on 1 hit point, you can play Scarlet Spider and still effectively heal him. But it just, it requires some other, you must have developed already a little bit to take full advantage of Scarlet Spider. The other little thing with him, which I've seen someone else do, is if you're trying to do a perfect defense deck, say maybe with Silk, and Silk defends, but the boost card is like a boost of 2 or 3, and so it ends up 1 or 2 damage comes through. Put that damage on Scarlet Spider instead. Now you can trigger all your stuff that rewarded you for defending and taking no damage from that attack. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Again, I think the biggest thing for me is just there's a lot of great allies. If you don't have, a huge Web Warrior collection with some of the older sets, then you might like Scarlet Spider quite a bit more. But just, the list is pretty long. Spider UK, Spider-Man Miles, the protection ally, Hobie Brown, Otto Octavian. There's just a couple others that we'll get to in the Silk pack here. Just a lot of competition for the ally slot. Okay, moving aspects here into our kind of hodgepodge of one-off cards in other aspects. First up is Quick Quip. This is a 2-cost Justice event. Has a requirement of a mental resource. Hero action, deal 1 damage to a Web Warrior character you control place a total of 2 confused status cards on up to 2 enemies. So I'm going to say a lot of the same things that I said about Stun Gun. So kind of the floor of this card is spending 3 ER to confuse the villain. And that's okay. Like, confusing always is really nice in solo whenever there's a time where we risk popping the main scheme in one villain phase. So in that way, confusing is like inherently better than thwarting, because we can thwart it down to 0 and still confuse. But, you know, for 3 resources, we could probably do it a bit more efficiently with cards available to us like Upside the Head, Sonic Rifle, Professor X. You know, again, should we really compare it to one of the best cards in the game? I don't know, but like Professor X is a very efficient way to confuse. How many confuse effects do we really want to play in the deck? So, you know, the floor is not terrible, honestly, but right, it's not a huge upgrade in options, in my opinion. Now, of course, there will be some situations where we take advantage of the 2 confused status cards. So one place we can do this is on a steady villain. So steady villains require 2 status cards to, you know, to actually be confused. So this is one of the most efficient ways to confuse a steady villain. Now, we still have to ask ourselves if that's something worth 3 resources to do. But depending on the game, I mean, Baron Zemo, he's steady and has a scheme of like 4, so we might want to confuse him. Someone like Magneto, maybe, I don't know, Magneto has those really low main scheme thresholds. So honestly, it could be justified there, but it's still just one enemy that we're confusing. Then we have these handful of cases where there's a second enemy out that is good to confuse. So it might be, you know, a multi-villain scenario where we can confuse multiple of those villains. There might be a Thunderbolt minion, or just the Thunderbolt scenario straight up, confuse 2 of the Thunderbolt minions. Could be a vulnerable minion that we can discard. And again, the upside here is going to be tremendous if we're able to do something like that. So I happily played 3 copies of Quick Quip in my video of Silk taking on Batroc, because he's got all these vulnerable minions. So confusing Batroc, discarding one of those minions was like one of the best cards in my deck. So, right, great situational use. Didn't make it in my top 5 because just across the entirety of the game, it's a little bit small of a subset. I didn't even mention these downsides here. I don't think they're huge downsides. Requirement of a mental, like obviously that's strictly worse, even though I don't think it's that hard to do. Lots of web warriors are geniuses or have web shooters to generate a mental resource. Genius letting you play ingenuity, which makes mental resources. Got to deal 1 damage to a web warrior. Again, 1 damage to the hero is not huge and might even help someone like Spider-Ham, but you know, it's more than 0, so takes it down a very small notch as well. All right, next we've got the 1 leadership card from the pack, Spider-Man 2099. This is a 4-cost leadership ally with 2 thwart, 2 attack, and 3 health. He's aerial and a web warrior. As a response, after Spider-Man 2099 uses a basic power, return a web warrior ally in play to its owner's hand. So first check with an ally we can do is the baseline efficiency check. I didn't really talk about this with Scarlet Spider because it's so weird with the 2 consequential damage. But kind of removing any ability from an ally, the baseline check is like, what do the stats tell us about how happy we are to play this card? And in Spider-Man 2099's case, he does not pass this. So for 2/2/3, for 2 thwart, 2 attack, and 3 hit points, we would hope that ally to cost 3. To activate twice and then block is just the normal kind of excellent value that we can get out of many allies in the game. So Spider-Man 2099 costs 4 resources. So that's 1 resource too much, or alternately, you could wish he had 1 more hit point. So he's starting off a little behind, but let's think about this response. So after he uses a basic power, bounce a web warrior to hand. So this is honestly, what we need to compare it to is blocking with that ally. So let's just assume either way that the ally's on their last hit point. Obviously, we're losing even more value if that ally still has hit points to spend from the first time that you spent resources playing it. I usually evaluate a block at 2 resources of value. Now, it's a little bit arbitrary, like that's just kind of my generalization across lots of cards available in the game, but I would say that's worth 2 resources. Bouncing an ally to hand, that's going to be worth exactly 1 resource. So just on a straight up efficiency level, I think it's a little bit worse. Before you say, but wait, you can draw a card with Web of Life and Destiny, you draw that card either way. You draw if it leaves play from a block, you draw if you've bounced it to hand. So just from a value perspective, like it's not it's not like a real positive value ability. What it does give you, and I'll give it some credit for this, is it does provide you some nice flexibility for the turn. And in leadership, like we very often just have full ally slots. Like I've definitely had plenty of games where I'm just discarding an ally because my ally slots are full. So this gives you a way to still make use of an ally by maybe just being another resource in hand without that. So it might raise the floor of some of your games, but I don't think Spider-Man 2099 has such a huge ceiling. Now, the other thing it does just in terms of flexibility is like it might bounce something to hand that perfectly aligns with like the resources you want to spend on the turn. Like let's say worst case scenario, let's say you have like a totally dead hand. You can bounce a 3-cost Web Warrior and replay it, spending maybe your whole hand. Now, like in a certain sense, right, I say that's worse than blocking, which is worth 2 resources. But from the turn sense, like you were actually able to get more value out of your whole turn by doing that than you would just from blocking. So again, so some of this is kind of, if there's like if there's a particular Web Warrior ally you want to bounce a lot and play, that's where I might think to do this. But there's a lot of basic Web Warriors. We can make the call. So if the question is just like getting something good in hand to play, like hopefully we're building a deck that always has good stuff to play, like especially, and there's several good Web Warriors. So how much better is bouncing some Web Warrior in play than just playing whatever we have in hand? Hopefully if we're building a good deck, we're generally happy to play whatever in our hand. So some interesting use for him. Looks like a fun card, sweet card, but he's kind of coming in a little below rate that I want for an ally. His ability isn't as good, I think, as blocking with allies, so I've kept him outside of my top 5. Then we've got one basic card here before the top 5. That is Investigative Journalism. This is the team-up card for Cindy Moon and Peter Parker, max 1 per deck. Alter Ego Interrupt. When an enemy would scheme, cancel that activation and confuse that enemy. So like all team-up cards, extremely efficient effect, 3 resources to prevent 2 schemes. But I think, especially compared to some other ones, this is a pretty hard one to pull off. I think the biggest thing just being like this is a interrupt in the villain phase. So we need to basically already be in the right forms before we draw this, and unless we're doing some shenanigans, we're not going to know that we're about to draw it for the next turn. If we're just holding it in hand as a holdover from the previous turn, like then that is not as efficient of a turn as it could be. Honestly, could still even be worth it because, like, I think we would happily pay 4 ER for this effect. Wouldn't be quite as good as 3 ER, but maybe we could do that from time to time. Cindy Moon is definitely someone who wants to go to Alter Ego a lot. Peter Parker can, but will stay in hero form a lot as well because he gets that extra draw whenever the villain initiates an attack. So I just think this one's a little bit hard to pull off. It's probably easier in well, not necessarily solo, but with only one hero at the table and you play the other one as an ally. That's probably a bit more realistic. But I think just the timing of it is enough of a reason, enough of a knock against it to keep it out of my top 5, even though the effect is very strong and efficient, as they always are with the team-up cards. Okie dokie. So now I'm ready to get into the top 5. Once again, these are my top 5 cards, which I'm defining as the most influential cards from a power level perspective, which is subtly different from just the most powerful cards. We're looking at broad applicability as well as being aware of high ceilings in certain decks. So at number 5, I've got Energy Shield. This is a 0-cost protection upgrade. It's an item and a tech. Attached to a character, max 1 per character. Interrupt: when attached character would take any amount of damage, spend X energy resources, prevent X of that damage. So, kind of at face value, what we would do with this card is, probably put it on an ally, and then it's going to represent ally healing over the course of the game. So, it costs 1 initial resource to get in, but then we can efficiently exchange 1 resource for an additional use of an ally for however long we want to do that. So even if that's on just a 2 thwart or 2 attack ally, that's going to be a fairly efficient exchange of resources. Where I'm really thinking about playing this card is in decks that have some stronger activation in their ally. So I'm thinking of Spider-Woman's Captain Marvel ally. In any Web Warrior, Spider-Man Peter Parker is really great to put this on. Someone like Braun, anyone who can attack for 3. In a multiplayer game, maybe some other aspects have allies that are nice to stick an energy shield on, maybe Snow Guard. So maybe I'm being a bit hypocritical in not valuing Scarlet Spider super highly with the heal ability versus this being a heal ability. But I think because every increment that you're doing is coming for 1 resource. Like, I love 0-cost cards. They're so easy to get into play, make an efficient turn out of them. Sure, you don't really get anything for that initial 1 resource, but it's just 1 resource. There's just so many turns where you've got something you want to do and you've got 1 resource left over. So you can pay for a 0-cost card like that. The other thing I would highlight with this, and this is maybe reflecting a high ceiling for a few heroes, which, you can argue that I should have put some of the other cards in the top 5 that are maybe a bit more broadly useful. But I think this is a really good card for Iron Man. Like, Iron Man protection is never not going to play one of these. Stick onto Iron Man, bump up the hand size by 1. That's just phenomenal. And then we might even play more to stick onto allies. It's only 1 that can go on Iron Man, but we can put it on allies to increase our hand size even more. Rocket Raccoon is someone who can discard tech cards to draw 2 cards. So this is very simple. Energy Shield comes into play. At some point, Rocket's going to discard it for 2 cards and be net +1 card on that exchange. So I think that's pretty appealing for those heroes. With the tech card, we should always mention Repurpose. This isn't a great repurpose card because it doesn't have a cost, so it's not going to buff your attack at all. That's kind of like a 2-cost expenditure, this card plus Repurpose for just a ready. But as a fallback, that might be acceptable. If we just want a density of tech cards in this Repurpose deck, it's something that's out there to use for it, just to increase our consistency a little bit. So this was pretty close for number 5. Let me know if you'd have something over it. I think even just talking through it, it's a little bit niche on there, but efficient ally healing, and then some tech synergies for a couple particular heroes. At number 4, I've got the Aggression ally, Spider-Woman. She's a 3-cost ally with 1 thwart, 2 attack, and 3 health, shield, and Web Warrior traits. After a Web Warrior ally, including this one, enters play, deal 1 damage to an ally. So this is an ally that does meet baseline efficiency. She's got an attack stat of 2, so she can attack twice and then block, and that would be totally fine. Then she has this responsibility that gives her even more value. There's not too much secret synergies or anything with Jessica Drew, play this at a table with maybe it's a solo deck where you got a bunch of basic Web Warrior allies. There's not any other aggression Web Warrior allies at the moment, but there's plenty of basic ones that you would be happy building a deck out of. And you're just going to get a free several chunks of damage over the course of that game. Now, it's not exactly unique in aggression to have this stat line and do some extra damage. Thinking of like Valkyrie, probably the best example, comes in and pops a minion for 2. Someone like Gold Balls can just attack for a lot of damage. But if we care about the Web Warrior trait there, then, right, say we've got Web of Life and Destiny or Across the Spider-Verse, then we're going to be pretty happy with Jessica Drew. What I'm also interested in doing, well, who knows if I'll do this, but kind of if you're bringing like a protection Web Warrior deck to a game night, I would just bring a copy of this, and then if someone's playing aggression, like just put it in their aggression deck. You know, they don't necessarily need to be playing Web Warriors. It just says after a Web Warrior ally enters play, deal 1 damage to an enemy. So they can just play that out. It'll still trigger off of all of your Web Warrior allies. So I think that's quite good. Increments of 1 damage are so nice. I mean, you can hit toughs. You're always going to damage efficiently. So I really like that part of it. Just a solid value card, right? And even for an ally in the Web Warrior archetype, gives you a strong reason to maybe consider aggression for playing Web Warriors, which we haven't had before. So I really like Spider-Woman Jessica Drew. At number 3, we've got my last ally on the list. We've got Madam Web. She's got 2 thwart, 1 attack, Web Warrior, of course, 2 health, and then response after Madam Web enters play, look at the top X cards of the encounter deck, where X is the number of Web Warrior cards you control. You may discard 1 card looked at this way and put the rest back in any order. So Madam Web, if we do the baseline efficiency check, she does not pass. She would need either 1 extra hit point or cost 1 fewer resources. But I really, really like this enters play ability. And this is something I think I've undervalued a little bit in the past. But you can really look at a lot of cards with this. Like, the floor is probably 2, right? Just her and your hero. Let's say you get 1 more. I mean, Web of Life and Destiny is kind of an easy one. You're going to play several other Web Warrior allies. You can really, and then you can discard 1 and you can move the others back in any order. So especially if you're at a low player count game, you're basically gonna, get the whole villain phase planned out for you. And so it's always a bit tricky to like assign a value to this. The risk is that you're gonna look at the top of the deck and it's like already in an order you like. And so you put it back and you've gotten 0 value. But it's sort of like, if that's the case already, then the game is going well for you. And if you were able to remove an Underfire, swap out a Shadow of the Past from an encounter card slot, like that is tremendous value. That's a sequence that could have just lost you the game. So this is something I put in an axis sort of called loss mitigation, where maybe it's not a great turn 1 or turn 2 play, but by the time you're in a mid-game, you have decent value going on, and you're just trying to avoid these worst-case scenarios, like Madam Web will give you lots of peace of mind going into the villain phase and kind of just take out some of those loss modes that you might otherwise not be able to plan around. So it's a really unique effect that is now accessible by Web Warriors. This is actually a card that makes me second guess Spider-Man 2099 a little bit. I think you could make a really nice deck by kind of bouncing her every single turn. Like, that sounds incredibly strong, even if it's not just like straight up value strong. It's like, how are you going to lose that game? You're ordering like the entire encounter deck if you're doing that turn after turn after turn. So with maybe make the calls, or I guess that's just kind of leadership. We got Across the Spider-Verse to recur allies. I think Madam Web just does a lot on this loss mitigation axis. And so I really like Madam Web. She's basic. I don't usually put basic above aspect cards because they're more broadly useful, but I mean, Madam Web can just easily go in any Web Warrior deck. So I like her at number 3. Oh, sorry, I completely lied. At number 2, I've got another ally. This is the last ally of the list, and it should be a fast one as well. So Spider Bite, 3 cost protection ally, 2 thwart, 1 attack, 2 health, Web Warrior. Reduce the cost to play Spider Bite by 1 for each tech card you control. So in order to meet baseline stats, we would need to control 1 tech card, and she would cost 1 fewer resource. Should be pretty easy to do, and the upside is very good and very achievable. Have 2 or 3 techs, make her cost 1 or 0. We've got an extremely efficient ally, either thwart and block, or maybe thwart twice, honestly, in protection. With that thwart of 2, might be good a lot of the time just to thwart for 2 twice. Need some techs, but this is like, she's like an A in a deck playing a moderate amount of techs. In Web Warriors, that's generally the case, and a lot of Web Warriors have a collection of tech upgrades to play. But even outside of that, say we are playing Iron Man or Rocket, like this is just a very good value card to play. Kind of interesting, this is kind of a cheap Web Warrior that you could get into play so that you could play Web of Life and Destiny without paying its resource cost. Get your other stuff going that says if you control a Web Warrior card. So this is how you can let some non-Web Warrior heroes play kind of the Web Warrior package of cards. Not sure if that's really a particularly strong thing to do compared to just playing those packages with a Web Warrior hero, but that's something that sort of came to mind with this one as being a very cheap Web Warrior to get into play that doesn't require other Web Warriors to be in play so that you can access that archetype. Number 2 is Spider Bite. And at number 1 on the whole list, I've got Ready for a Fight. This is a 1-cost protection upgrade. It's a preparation, has a requirement of a physical resource, max 1 per player, interrupt when an enemy would scheme, discard Ready for a Fight, change to hero form, that enemy attacks you instead. So I was thinking about this for quite a bit, and I'm going to make a kind of a bold claim here, but I think this is a paradigm-shifting card for protection, both in multiplayer and in solo. I think some years down the line, some new player is going to join the game, and they're gonna post on Reddit about, you know, how did you guys play solo protection before Ready for a Fight came out? Like, this card does so many things and has an incredibly unique effect in protection. So we'll see if I can remember all the ones that I thought about listing as I was thinking about what I was going to say. So first of all, let's consider just the loss mitigation aspect of preventing the villain scheming. This is a very simple thing that protection does not have great access to. So typically Confusing will do this, but if you would just straight up lose the game to the villain scheming, Ready for a Fight will switch that scheme to an attack. Changing to hero form is not a cost of the card, so you could even be in hero form and it'll do that. One thing we should say just right off the bat, changing a scheme to an attack, that's kind of neutral on value. So in a sense, we're kind of paying 2 resources to do nothing there. That's from a value perspective. From a loss mitigation perspective, this is phenomenal. Say there's 5% of games that you're going to lose because there's a turn where you just can't play around advance. This is going to answer that for you. And compared to something like Get Behind Me, it's infinitely better to be an upgrade that you can just play 1 of, have it sit in play, and it's ready for exactly when you need it. It's not an ally like Tempest that's going to take up an ally slot. It's just going to sit around and just like increase your win rate by a literal 3 to 5%, whatever that counts for those turns where you would otherwise lose to an advance. Okay, bigger part of the card is this fact that it enables us to access alter ego abilities while still entering the villain phase in hero form. So this is always a tension of protection decks. We want to play a perfect defense deck that's got tons of stuff going on in the villain phase. We want to trigger our unflappables every turn. We don't want to draw a handful of defense events, but then we're an alter ego, so we can't do anything in the next player phase. This allows you to go down to alter ego, obviously use any abilities you might find on your hero, draw up to hand size using your alter ego hand size, and then flip to hero form to do all your stuff. So I would actually say, I mean, this is really not a card about increasing your total value output, increasing your value ceiling, but it's really a one-of-a-kind card for increasing the floor of your deck. You're just not going to have these turns where you draw 4 defense events, a double resource, and whatever, and just like have nothing to play. It's going to let you, do your whole turn in hero form. Now, granted, we have to compare that to just, well, what if I just stayed in hero form forever? So we do need some reason to want to go to alter ego form. One of those reasons could be for the heroes that have a hero hand size of 4, and then if we have an alter ego hand size of 6, like it's kind of just free to play ready for a fight. So we've got like She-Hulk or Colossus, and these are interesting heroes because they also give us some benefit when we flip to hero form. Like I think this is the first card in the game that's an aspect or basic card that lets us flip our form. So this gives us, faster speed of like flipping back and forth, so we can trigger She-Hulk's ability of dealing 2 damage to an enemy, Colossus's ability of getting another tough card. She-Hulk in particular also gets, she'll prevent 1 threat using her alter ego ability on step 1 of the villain phase. But then, we might have some other hero abilities. Say we're Spider-Man, we've got the ability to make a mental resource in alter ego. We might want to flip down, obviously, just to heal. With Spider-Man, we've got Aunt May. Several heroes have a healing card that they can only use in alter ego. Or just to recover. Like this is another kind of traditional, classic downfall or disadvantage of protection heroes. Or not disadvantage, but just obstacle to protection heroes. Even if you're doing the defend a lot thing, you're spending every turn in hero form, you're gonna take some damage. Eventually, you want to recover that. So you can flip down and recover, and then still get back to hero form to play all the cards that your deck has been built around. So, right, in multiplayer, we're doing this defend for everybody strategy. Like, yeah, we just really want to be in hero form. In solo, smaller player counts, larger player counts as well, but at larger player counts, we're not at as much risk of losing to a single advance. But in those cases, this can just stop the villain from scheming to make it attack us instead. So, yeah, just like I said, not like it's really a floor increasing card, not a ceiling increasing card. But like I wouldn't be surprised if I never play a solo deck again that doesn't have ready for a fight. Like that's how I'm really viewing this card. Yeah, it's a preparation. Black Widow. Black Widow is a hero who is going to benefit tremendously from this. Black Widow gets a ton of value in alter ego form. So say we get the hand size, her ability that draws a card when you play a preparation. The safe house is an alter ego action. I really like Leo Fitz with her as an alter ego action. So this is like a no-brainer for Black Widow to do all that stuff in alter ego, but then still be in hero form to trigger all your preparations for the villain phase. Like that's a phenomenal card for her. But like Colossus, She-Hulk, like we're gonna build decks around these. Or there's just anytime you have reasons to go to alter ego, but you mostly want to spend your villain phases in hero form, ready for a fight is just a game-changing card for being able to do that. Okay, so that'll wrap up my review of the new aspect and basic cards. I'm just going to quickly touch on the reprints in case you are a newer player and are getting your hands on some of these reprints for the first time. First up, we've got Not Today. This is a 1-cost protection event. It's a defense. It gives your hero +2 defense, and then if you take no damage from that attack, remove 2 threat from a scheme. So this is kind of a solid card. There's lots of cards in the game that have a similar effect where it's like a 1-cost, buff your defense, and if you take no damage, do something. I think this is among the better of them because protection doesn't have a lot of ways to remove threat from schemes. I wouldn't view this as like, oh, this is my threat removal for the deck, because it's not going to really help you like deal with a problematic side scheme on its own. You're only removing 2 threat, but just from a value perspective, like it's pretty good. Now, the one problem with defense is like it's always so efficient to just block with allies. When we defend, say we've got a 3 defense hero, we defend for 5 using this, and the villain has an attack of 2 and draws a boost of 0. Like in that case, we didn't actually get value from the defend part of it, so we kind of just got an inefficient thwart out of this. So this card, you know, it's not like one of the best protection cards, but it is okay for the strategy that it's kind of pushing you towards, and gets an extra plus for doing some threat removal in protection, which typically has pretty little access to it. Next, we've got Across the Spider-Verse. I actually don't have it in front of me here, sorry. But this is a basic event, 2-cost event, max 1 per deck. You spend it, exhaust a Web Warrior card you control, and then bring back a Web Warrior from your discard pile to play. And then I think you or maybe any player can repeat this ability for the cost of 3 resources. So this is just a really efficient way to get Web Warriors into play. So if you've got a 3 or a 4-cost Web Warrior, you're essentially getting it at a discount of 1, because this is 3 ER from hand, and then if it's coming in from the discard pile, right, we don't add that 1 cost we usually do when we're playing something from hand. So any 3 or 4-cost ally, it's an efficient thing to get into play. Granted, we have to exhaust a Web Warrior card, but if it's just an ally, that's not a huge cost, because their sort of uses are determined by their hit points. Web of Life and Destiny is always pretty free to exhaust. It doesn't have to exhaust to do its card draw trigger. So, and then we could even repeat this and do it again. It can bypass the resource requirement restriction on Spider-Man Peter Parker, which is very good. So it's just a staple of Web Warrior decks. Really any deck playing Spider-Man Peter Parker, I would have an inclination to play this. Okay, and speaking of which, okay, I had to check. I'm 99% sure it's in there, but it's actually not on Marvel CDB. I believe you get the Spider-Man Peter Parker basic ally in the Silk pack as well. Not much to say here. One of the best cards in the game. Has a resource requirement that you might not always hit, but one of the most powerful activations in the game. Activating for 2, then readying probably your hero to attack or thwart again for 2. One of the best allies to Voltron up, to heal, to use Energy Shield like I mentioned. So pretty much never play a Web Warrior deck without this, unless for some reason you're really afraid of the resource requirement. And if you want to build around Peter Parker at all, I very often play 2 copies of the Power in All of Us in order to use those wild resources to be whatever resources I need to play Peter Parker. All right, so with that, we reviewed every aspect and basic card in the Silk pack. I really like the balance on a lot of these cards. There's a lot of those cards that are, we don't want every single card to be a staple and kind of displace old cards every time the new cards comes out. They've got some interesting effects, interesting things to build around. Maybe there's unique scenarios or unique heroes where these cards provide use, and that's great. That's where cards should be. Especially if you've got a lot of the Web Warriors already. I know stuff like Sinister Motives is kind of hard to find, but there are some really excellent enhancements in this pack for Web Warriors. You can build a sweet leadership Web Warrior deck with Spider-Man 2099, a sweet aggression Web Warrior deck with Spider-Woman, and then have some new toys like Madam Web for any Web Warrior deck that you want to build. So let me know if you disagreed with anything in the comments, if I overlooked some aspect of a card, if you think I underrated something or overrated something. I'd be curious to hear about it. Of course, my ranking is kind of subjective, so I won't fight you too hard on maybe the ranking, but always interested to learn what you guys see in these cards that I might have missed. So with that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.